Okay. Welcome everyone to Fundamentals of Kabbalah and Chassidut, continuing our series on the life and teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. We left off, Baal Shem Tov is 30 years old, and he was just appointed as the leader of the hidden society of tzaddikim that he has been a part of since he was actually a child. But after many years, he was raised to the leadership of this hidden society. And this was at age 30. As we'll see shortly, he revealed himself to the world at age 36. But during those 6 years, he had a bit of an inner debate as to the direction, now that he was the leader of this group of hidden tzaddikim, who were spread out very widely. They were hidden, but they were working, their whole mission in life was to bring encouragement and life and teaching to Am Yisrael, especially the simple Jews, the 90% of the Jewish population that was extremely poor, oppressed, and not high in scholarship, but deep in faith and good characteristics. And the Baal Shem was feeling that maybe they should be more open, more visible as to their agenda. But anyways, he went back and forth. And during these years, he continued to learn with Achia Hashloni. We introduced him last week, I believe. It was his heavenly mentor who was directing him, teaching him, learning together with him. And this went on until he was 36. Now, an important thing that we've mentioned is, of course, the Baal Shem Tov was revealed to this hidden group of tzaddikim. And as we said, Baal Shem Tov traveled extensively. He also moved from place to place. And in those places, he somewhat revealed his greatness. He did it in a very humble way. He didn't look for accolades or positions, but people gathered around him. He was a shochet, and he also would start a minyan wherever he was, so he could daven in the ecstatic way that he was used to. But then he would move on. And again, this was during a period, there's no email, Facebook, Instagram, telephone. So you leave a place, and in many instances, you're forgotten. So this went on for a long time. And then, as he is approaching his 36th birthday, and we've discussed this before, how major events in his life happened on his birthday. To review quickly, at age 16, Eliyahu Navi came to him and began to teach him. At 26, he began learning with Achia Shiloni, all on his birthday. And now his 36th birthday is approaching, and Achia Shiloni, for those who have been at the classes, they begin learning at Bereshit, from the first word of the Torah, and now it's 10 years later, and they're finishing the Chumash. Now, of course, they learned many things along with each verse in the Torah. But at this point, Achia Shiloni tells the Baal Shem Tov, it's now time for you to be revealed in the world. In other words, it's the part of your life that you were a hidden tzaddik is going to come to an end. And you need to reveal the teachings that we've been learning together and that you've come to on your own. It's time because you were brought into this world to be a leader and initiate these teaching world. And the tradition is the Baal Shem, a little bit like Moshe at the burning bush. So he resisted this. He wasn't, actually the Arizal also, when Eliyahu Navi told him he should go to Tzfat and reveal the teachings, he also resisted. They felt that their service of God was best in a hidden way. But Achia Shiloni assured him, this is not why you came into the world. You came into the world to be a leader and to introduce these teachings into the world. The Baal Shem Tov, apparently it took him close to 4 months of inner debate. One story is that he revealed to his wife, if you remember, before they got married, he revealed to her in a certain way his greatness and his participation in this society of hidden tzaddikim, but that he needed to be hidden. And now he came to her and said, it's time, I'm being told to reveal myself. And he shared with her that he wasn't sure this was the best thing. And so at a certain point, she said, well, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? So he said, we should fast and pray over this. And they fasted for 3 days, and they davened the whole time. And at the end, the Baal Shem felt that he got a direct message from God saying this is the right time, this is the right thing to, you need to move forward. And so the Baal Shem made this essential decision that he would now be revealed in the world. Now, it's such an interesting story what happened from this point. Once his decision was made, it wasn't that he went out with a placard and say, okay, everyone, I'm going to reveal myself. So according to tradition, well, what happened? How did he reveal himself? So at this point, we have to remember he's living in Kitov. And this is where his brother-in-law, Gershon, is living. And he and his wife work in an inn. And one day, a number of the scholars of Kitov were sitting around, and one of them mentioned the Baal Shem Tov. And he said, you know, he acts like he's somewhat ignorant, but I had such and such an experience with him, and it's clear to me he's not what he pretends to be, that he's this great neshama. One of the other rabbis there said, that's so interesting that you said that, because yes, I also had this amazing experience with him. And I know that he's this great light, but he wanted to be hidden. And all of a sudden, everyone is piping in that they had these experiences many times when someone had a deep spiritual experience with the Baal Shem Tov, he made them promise not to tell anyone. But here we see that everything is lining up. Achia Shiloni from heaven tells him it's time for him to reveal. And so that energy, without it being announced, is working itself out. So this group of rabbis, and there was a substantial, and we're like, oh my gosh, like we've had this holy person in our presence all this time, and we didn't acknowledge it, and we allow him to kind of be hidden. We should go find him and acknowledge to him that we know who you are. And so this group of rabbis go out looking for the Baal Shem Tov, and they find him under a tree. And they come to him, and they for the first time acknowledge and give him honor. And for the first time, the Baal Shem Tov starts saying Torah in front of these great rabbis. If you remember, this town was very, very famous for its scholars and its yeshivot. And yet all these years, they had thought of the Baal Shem Tov as just being ignorant, and the best that he could do was just be a teacher assistant for children. And now they realize that they've had this precious light amongst them all this time. And as individuals, they saw the light, but they never put it together like who he really was. So that day, under this tree, they said, they called him Rebbe. Rebbe, teach us. And so, in short, here's some of the things that the Baal Shem Tov began to reveal to them. These were major tenets in his teachings. And first of all, one of the things that the Baal Shem Tov came to reveal was that the time of fasting and almost abusing the body as a way of reaching spiritual heights, he revealed to them that that time has to be over. It's not positive. It leads to depression and sadness. And the body needs to be trained and directed, but not broken. And the soul needs to learn to live with the body and work together, not to totally try to break the body through constant fasting. And this was the custom among people who wanted to serve God. They felt that that is the way to do it, a very asceticism. The Baal Shem Tov, as we'll see, excuse me, sorry. So this was a theme with individuals, and when he would speak to groups of people, he wanted to introduce a new way of serving God through joy, through pleasure, through not overemphasizing the body in any way, shape, or form, but not to degrade the body and try to break it to the point that a constant fasting, many people would fast from Shabbos to Shabbos. This is a very common thing in those days, but the Baal Shem Tov felt that it broke joy. It led to a sadness and a depression that the people weren't even aware that they were caught in this kind of a trap. So that was one of the messages that he gave on that day that he revealed himself. He also spoke about the love of Israel. Now we might think this is a given, but as we have spoken about and we're going to develop even more, the Baal Shem Tov recognized there was almost like two statuses in Israel, almost like two castes. There was the scholarly caste, and then there was everyone else. And among the scholars, there was definitely a tendency to look down on the less learned. And so one of the great themes of the Baal Shem Tov was that one needs to love every Jew, even a Jew who is not observing all of the mitzvot, that a Jew is a Jew and needs to be loved just like part of the family. This is a major teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. Then he spoke about this idea b'chol derachecha de'ehu, that you can know God in all of your ways. Again, this is a major plank, the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, that coming close to God was not just through studying Torah and praying, that every action that we take, every part of our lives is an opportunity to come close to God. And then he told a mashal. The Baal Shem Tov was famous for his stories. That's how he turned on so many people. So he told them a parable. And the parable was of a king who had a palace, and he very much wanted his son to raise himself up spiritually and do it through an independent kind of search. And so he came up with this plan where he let it known to the entire kingdom that if anyone could get to the king, there would be tremendous riches. And even along the way, the closer you get, the more presents you get. But if you can get all the ways to the king, that's where the great reward will be. But what did the king do? He made a moat around the castle, and he put snakes and crocodiles and scorpions. And there was a wall within wall within wall. And at every wall, there were these fierce soldiers with spears guarding the doors. So people like, wow, the king is offering all these treasures. And they come, and some see the moat, and like, how are we even get across the moat to even get to the first wall? So many people just said, this must be some kind of a joke or something, or it's for real, but not for me. But there were those who were like, no, we're going to find a way. And they did. They found a way to get over the moat. And then they come to the first gate with these treacherous looking soldiers. And more people gave up, but some found a way through. And as they got through, they were given gifts. And so as they got closer and closer to the king, there were less and less people. One of them, of course, was the son of the king, because it's not that he wanted all of the rewards, but he wanted to be close to his father. That's what he wanted. And so many people, once they got some nice gifts, it was like, okay, this is maybe I'll take what I can get. I think many television shows were made based on this idea over the years. I don't remember the names of them, but these kind of contest shows. Anyways, to make a long story short, eventually everyone drops out. Some got fairly close, but everyone dropped out except the son of the king. And he was determined at all costs to get to his father. And finally, he gets to the last obstacles. But there's like one more obstacle. But he's gotten through everything. And then all of a sudden, all of it disappears. The moat disappears. All the walls disappear. All the soldiers disappear. And he finds himself standing in front of his father, who is just beaming with joy that his son didn't give up. And he could see that his son's motivation were not the gifts, were not the treasures, was just to be close to the king. This is the parable that the Baal Shem Tov told these great rabbis. And he explained this is the story of really every neshama, that our task is to get close to our Father in heaven. And the way of this world is that there are obstacles. But our mission in this world, the soul and the body, is to do our best to get through all of the obstacles and to show not only ourselves, but our Father in heaven, how much we want to be close to him. So this is a classic parable from the Baal Shem Tov. And he continued by saying the importance of yearning to be close to God. And that should be a major part of our lives, that we should never just sit back on our laurels. We should never feel that we've made it. We've learned everything that there is to learn. We're as close as we can be. We say, no, there is no such thing. We're constantly striving and yearning to be close to Hashem. So this is part of the revelation of the Baal Shem Tov on that day, his 36th birthday. And at this point, for the rest of his life, he assumed the role of leadership, from which the Hasidic movement came. And I want to make something very clear now, because again, the Baal Shem Tov is part of this hidden society of tzaddikim. And even though many, many people have the picture of the Baal Shem Tov as being this charismatic, spontaneous, out-of-the-box kind of person, well, that is definitely partly true. But we have to understand that from a young age, he was part of a group of people that wanted to change Am Yisrael, that wanted to bring light to the world, that wanted to bring redemption to the world, to bring Torah to the world, to bring God to the world. And so on his 36th birthday, The idea that a Hasidic movement just happened to form around him is not accurate. He was very intentional, as we will see in the upcoming classes, in forming this new movement. It really comes out of the Society of the Hidden Tzaddikim, all of who, now that he's revealed, they became the pillars of this movement. So what happens at this point? So the Baal Shem Tov, all of these great rabbis in this, it was just one town right now, accepted him as their Rebbe. They understood that he was a shining light, and they wanted him to stay. They had no way to support him. So the Baal Shem Tov went back to being a Melamed, to be a assistant teacher for children, and from which he did get a salary. Wasn't very much. But here, a major turning point in the life of the Baal Shem happens, is that here he becomes what's called the Baal Shem. Now, we've been referring to him this whole time as the Baal Shem Tov, but he's not known as that. He's Yisrael, the son of Eliezer. That is how he's known. No one has ever put the name, the Baal Shem Tov, on him. And as discussed, a Baal Shem, what it meant in those days was someone who was considered like a miracle worker, a healer, someone who worked with herbs and ointments and healed people. And many of them were considered to be able to miraculously heal people. This is what a Baal Shem was called in those days. And so at this point of his life, because of his constantly being in nature, through those years, from other Jews and non-Jews, he learned the secrets of plants. And we have to remember, this is before there were drugstores. This is before there was all the modern medical advancements that we take for granted, especially in drugs and pills and medication. So everyone used natural ways to heal themselves. And these natural ways is actually what is the main ingredients in a lot of our pharmaceuticals. So the Baal Shem Tov had learned the secrets of healing. And so at that point, he becomes a Baal Shem. And the word gets out that he knows how to heal people. And people start coming to him. And the word starts to spread. And remember, we have a whole built-in group of the Hidden Tzaddikim. And so if someone needed to be healed 100 kilometers away, so they would say, you should go to the Baal Shem Tov. And that's where the word Tov was added. None of the other Baal Shems were called the Baal Shem Tov. That was unique to the Baal Shem. He became the Baal Shem Tov. And at this point, his reputation began to spread because many, many people came to him and they had miraculous recoveries. There are really scores of stories, hundreds of stories. My purpose in this series is not to go into all of those stories. I'm more interested in giving over about the actual person, the Baal Shem Tov, and his teachings and how his life developed. But there's no doubt that his reputation as a healer, as a Baal Shem, began to spread far and wide and quickly, very, very quickly. Along with using natural herbs, he also began writing amulets. An amulet, there are many, many different types of amulets, but they were written on parchment, similar to like how we have a mezuzah. And sometimes they were put in like a necklace or in a case. And the Baal Shem was not the first one to use amulets. It was a known thing for hundreds and hundreds of years that different Baal Shems would write amulets. Many times it had names of God, or verses or prayers, and this came along with the healing and the herbs. And so the Baal Shem started to have scribes who would make out these amulets. It was said that a lot of times all he put was his name, Yisrael, in these amulets. I don't know if we know the full scope of what he wrote for what person. It's very, very likely that according to the person, he would have an amulet written. Along with this new stage in his life, he continued traveling. But now it was very, very different because he was known. Almost everywhere he went, he was now known that he was coming to their town. So large groups of people would be attracted to him. And he continued his teachings. But before, it was in a very hidden way. He would come to a town and he would approach the simple Jews and he would tell stories and he would encourage them. And he would, through this society of hidden tzaddikim, he would try to make sure they were schooling for the children, and then he would disappear. So here he continues to do this. But now he's very, very famous. So the crowds that he's doing are getting bigger and bigger. More and more people are coming to him. And then the Baal Shem, and he's teaching all, for those who have been part of this series, we spent actually a majority of the series learning what was the Baal Shem teaching, what were the different ideas. Even tonight, we went over some of the main ones. He had some main themes, but at a certain point, he realized that in order for this movement to be able to be solid and to continue, he needed to attract the scholars. Now, when he revealed himself, he did attract a good number of scholars. But now he had a bigger vision, that he realized that the more scholars that could become attached to his teachings, the more they would go out and teach this. And that was a major decision in the Baal Shem Tov's life. And so, partly through Ruach HaKodesh, the divine inspiration, he began to pinpoint people that he wanted specifically to become his students and part of this new movement. And so that was a major turning point in what allowed the Hasidic movement to be successful. Because if he wouldn't have had this core group of scholars, it could have been when he passed away, then no one would have known what to do with these teachings. So a good part of the rest of his life, he is concentrating not not abandoning in any way, shape, or form reaching out to the simple Jews, because that was one of his major planks, is that the scholarly sect or part of the Jewish people have to come to respect and to love and to draw closer those who had not had the chance to be as learned. Now, this I want to mention is very important, because when the Baal Shem would go to the simple Jews, so he would tell stories and he would have, as it were, just encouragement, love, light, the message of to be joyful, to have faith, to be strong in your observance. All of these just major ideas. When we were going through the Keter Shem Tov, which we did for many classes, we saw that these teachings, these were the teachings for the scholars, and they were brilliant, but they were based on verses and very deep understanding of the Talmud, of the Zohar, of the Aral, the entire mystical tradition. So we see that he really had like two different types of teachings, and he would apply it according to who he was speaking to. He had a way of everyone heard exactly what they needed to hear. Now here, I mentioned it before, but if we remember, the whole story is that when the Baal Shem married his wife, he appeared to be ignorant, even though he revealed to her his true identity. But to her brother, he was terribly embarrassed that his sister married this person. He begged her for years to divorce him. Sometimes he would go out of his way to help support them and give them a way of support. But basically, he looked at his brother-in-law as just being ignorant and foolish and a dunce. So you can imagine when the other scholars of his town recognized the Baal Shem Tov as being their Rebbe. So you can imagine the kind of like the identity crisis that Reb Gershon went through. But to his great credit, he recognized that he had treated his brother-in-law very poorly. And of course, Baal Shem never let on. So, but nonetheless, he felt really terrible about it. And he became one of his major students, as we will see. And they became very close. So I have to say that for both of them, that for the Baal Shem Tov to have a big neshama and forgive his brother-in-law, and for his brother-in-law to have gone through like a tshuva process for the way he had treated his Baal Shem Tov, and then taken upon himself that this is now my Rebbe, shows really the greatness of both of them. Okay. Now, I just want to mention a little bit more about Adel, his daughter. I told one story about her last week, And we learned that her name, Adel, comes from a acronym for Eish Dat Lamo. Is a part of a verse in the Song of Ha'azinu, in the book of Devarim, Deuteronomy, the Song of Ha'azinu, where the Torah is described as a fiery law for his people. And so he named in the first letters of these three words, Aish is an Aleph, Dat is a Dalet, Lamo is a Lamed. That spells out Adel. So that was his daughter's name. And he explained to his students, that's why he named her that. And she was a very, very special child. It was the Baal Shem Tov and his wife's first child. And there was a very deep relationship between them. And as we go forward, we'll see that we'll see the importance of age in his life. One story is she was respected not just because she was the daughter of the Baal Shem Tov, but for her own wisdom, her own scholarship. After the Baal Shem Tov passed away, many people came to Adel for advice, for inspiration. She was a great, great neshama. And one story is it just shows how much she was respected. There was after Shabbos, on Motzi Shabbos, there's a whole string of songs that some people sing, depending on the community, depending on the person. One of them is it's a long string of asking God to open up the gate of livelihood, the gate of inspiration, the gate of learning, the gate of divine help, a whole list of asking God to open up certain gates. And so there was a lively discussion between the students of the Baal Shem Tov, which gate is the most important. So they all gave their opinion. And Adel, who was there, said the most important gate is to ask God to open the gate for divine assistance. So this was her opinion. So they decided, let's go to the Baal Shem Tov and see which one he chooses. Now this is interesting because in Pirkei Avot, the chapters of the fathers, there's a similar thing when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai kind of throws out a challenge to his students. What is the best way to walk in the world? What's the best attitude to have? And there it tells the whole story of 5 different answers. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai chooses Lev Tov, a good heart. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. So here's a similar kind of story. They go to the Baal Shem Tov and say, so which gate is the most important? I said this, and he said this, and Adel said that. So he said what Adel said is the most important, because all the other gates are dependent on divine assistance. Without divine assistance, none of these gates will happen. That is the definition of asking God to open this gate, is really the gate of divine assistance. So this just shows you among all the students that Adel shone on her own. Okay, around this time, his son is born. And he named Tzvi, and he gave a reason for this also, that the three letters of Tzvi, Tzadi, Bet, Yud, stand for Tzadik be'emunato yichiyah. A tzaddik in his faith will live. Some interpret yichiyah can also be read, a tzaddik in his faith gives life to others. In other words, that his faith and the way his example in this world, that gives strength and life to other people. So he named his son Tzvi, also an acronym. And I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. As I mentioned that after the Baal Shem Tov passed away, Adel, she maintained the great honor that people had for her, the great respect. For an entire year after the Baal Shem Tov passed away, his son Tzvi led the Hasidic movement. Exactly a year later, on the yurtzeit of the Baal Shem Tov, they were having a Su'udah, the core students. And at that point, with no one prompted him, he officially said, I'm not one to lead this movement. And he, in a certain way, appointed the Maggid of Mezrich to be the leader of the new Hasidic movement. Hopefully, probably next week or the week after, we will get to the Maggid of Mezrich, who in the approximately 11 years that he led the Hasidic movement, it went from a somewhat, even though the reputation of the Baal Shem Tov had spread all over, and the foundations of the Hasidic movement were set. It was the Maggid of Mezrich, through his students, who was able to make it into a movement that would last and have incredible influence to this day. So that also shows the greatness of his son, that, and especially in that day, even to this day, many Hasidic courts is from father to son, father to grandson, or father to son-in-law. In most cases, that's how it works. But here we see the humbleness of the Baal Shem Tov's son, that on his own he understood, I'm not the right person for this task. So that shows his greatness in a big way. And we'll end this class with the following. We already mentioned this, that there's a tradition that before the Baal Shem Tov came into this world, when his neshama was still in heaven, he was told that he needs to go down and he'll be a great leader. And the Baal Shem, just like when Achia Shiloni tells him it's time for you to reveal yourself. So the Baal Shem said, I won't go down unless you guarantee me 60 heroes that will surround me. And they agree, and according to tradition, they agreed. And so many of the upcoming classes will be these. We're not saying there were exactly 60, but with all of the tens of thousands of people who now were flocking to the Hasidic movement and and taking upon themselves Hasidic customs and the way of prayer and of study and attitude, the Baal Shem had this core group around him. And even though there are many, many great rabbis in other cities that accepted the Baal Shem as their Rebbe, we're going to see next week that and that's what we're going to pick up next week, is the Baal Shem's attempt to go to Eretz Yisrael. It's a very, very important story in his life, where the Baal Shem Tov, with only two other people, one was his daughter Adel and his scribe Reb Tzvi. So you can imagine the way that the Baal Shem Tov understood the spiritual level of his daughter in this, in his eyes, messianic attempt to go to Eretz Yisrael. He only took his daughter, and that's how much he trusted her and knew her spiritual level. So that's what we're going to pick up next week, with the story of the Baal Shem and Adel and Reb Tzvi attempting to come to Eretz Yisrael, and the effect of that on the Baal Shem Tov, and then moving into the very, very important part of his life when he moves to Mezrich. Into Medjugorje. The Magi was from Mezrich, and the Baal Shem, after his trip to Eretz Yisrael, so he set up quarters, we'll say, in Mezrich, and that is where he passed away. But that's where these 60 heroes came, and they moved to Mezrich, and they became his core group. And the most important of all of them, we're going to see, was the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich becomes one of his main students, and then he is responsible for taking the Hasidic movement and establishing it on totally firm ground, and sending out his students to set up Hasidic movements all over Europe. And that's where we will pick up next time.